The headlines have been dramatic, the images even more so. The USS Charlotte, a Los Angeles-class submarine, launched a torpedo that sent the Iranian frigate IRIS Dena to the bottom of the Indian Ocean. Cameras captured the moment. Social media exploded. News anchors declared it a turning point. And President Trump, in a move that surprised even seasoned defense analysts, elevated the destruction of Iran's navy to one of the central objectives of what the Pentagon is calling Operation Epic Fury. It looks like a decisive victory. It feels like dominance. But here's the problem. The narrative that the United States has effectively ended Iran's maritime threat is missing a huge chunk of the story. And that missing chunk could determine whether the Strait of Hormuz stays open or closed for the global economy. Let's break this down properly. What actually happened? Yes, the United States destroyed Iran's conventional navy with remarkable speed and efficiency. The IRIS Dena was the most high-profile casualty, an Iranian frigate that had been participating in naval exercises with India, operating out of Sri Lankan waters when the USS Charlotte struck. But she wasn't even the first ship hit, and she wasn't the most strategically consequential. In the opening hours of the conflict, Tomahawk cruise missiles rained down on Iranian ports. The Shahid Bagheri was struck. Multiple frigates were hit while still docked. Port facilities were damaged and degraded. The United States also targeted infrastructure supporting the naval forces of the Islamic Revolutionary Corps, the IRGC, which has historically been far more aggressive than Iran's conventional navy. The scope of the destruction is genuinely significant. Iran has lost the core of its surface fleet in a matter of days. By almost any conventional military metric, that counts as a naval defeat of historic proportions. But here is where the narrative starts to fall apart. Iran's navy was never the real threat. To understand why sinking frigates doesn't actually solve the problem, you have to understand what Iran's navy was and wasn't designed to do. Since the late 1980s, Iran's large conventional warships have not posed a meaningful military threat to either American forces or commercial shipping in the Gulf. That's not speculation, that's the historical record. Think back to April 1988, Operation Praying Mantis. After Iran mined the USS Samuel B. Roberts, the United States launched a one-day operation that destroyed several Iranian vessels and damaged shore infrastructure. Iran's conventional navy took serious losses then too. And yet, Iran's ability to threaten shipping in the Gulf did not disappear. It adapted. Because the real threat was never the frigates. The real threat was always the ecosystem of asymmetric weapons that Iran spent decades quietly building up. Mines, drones, ground-launched cruise missiles, small boats loaded with explosives or weapons operated by IRGC forces in swarms that can overwhelm ship defenses. These are the tools that give Iran genuine power in the narrow, shallow waters of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. The geography matters enormously here. The Strait of Hormuz is only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through it. You don't need a blue water navy to threaten traffic through a 21-mile choke point. You need missiles on the shore, mines beneath the surface, and small, fast boats willing to take the fight close. Iran has all of those things, and none of them were on those frigates. The Shahid Bagheri and what it represents. The strike on the Shahid Bagheri deserves special attention because it represents one of the more genuinely consequential actions of this conflict so far. The Shahid Bagheri was Iran's drone carrier, a vessel specifically designed to project drone power at sea. Drones have reshaped modern warfare, and Iran has invested heavily in drone technology. Taking out the platform that enabled maritime drone operations matters. But even here, the picture is complicated. Drone technology is not locked inside a single ship. The knowledge, the production capacity, and the stockpiles exist on Iranian soil. The IRGC operates drone programs independently. Destroying one carrier vessel disrupts operations. It does not eliminate the capability. This is a pattern worth watching throughout this conflict. Striking visible, dramatic targets produces headlines. It does not necessarily degrade the underlying capability in a proportionate way. The human cost we can't ignore. Before we continue analyzing strategy, we have to pause on something that is not getting nearly enough attention in Western coverage of this conflict. One of the most catastrophic failures of Operation Epic Fury so far was the destruction of an elementary school in Manab. The strike came during the campaign targeting IRGC facilities, and it resulted in considerable loss of life, children among them. This is not a footnote. This is the human reality of warfare in densely populated areas where military and civilian infrastructure exist in proximity. Every analysis of whether this operation is achieving its objectives has to reckon with that cost. Strategy divorced from its human consequences is not serious analysis. Why Trump's focus on the Navy is surprising and revealing. When President Trump elevated the destruction of Iran's Navy to a core war objective, it genuinely caught analysts off guard. The conventional wisdom heading into any Iran-US conflict was that the Navy would be destroyed almost incidentally as a byproduct of broader strikes, not celebrated as a primary goal. So why the emphasis? One interpretation is purely political. Sinking ships produces dramatic, shareable imagery. A submarine destroying a frigate on the open ocean is the kind of visual that plays well in press conferences and campaign retrospectives. One analyst puts it bluntly, the point of destroying the Iranian Navy in such visually dramatic fashion may have been to generate headlines and positive press for the Trump administration. That's a cynical read, but it's not an unreasonable one. Another interpretation is that destroying Iran's conventional naval capacity serves a longer-term strategic purpose, undermining the Islamic Republic's claim to international legitimacy. The IRIS Dena's participation in Indian naval exercises wasn't just a training mission, it was a show-the-flag operation, demonstrating that Iran is a legitimate state actor capable of projecting power on the world stage. Sinking that ship sends a different kind of message to the international community. If one of the broader objectives of Operation Epic Fury is some form of regime change or political transformation in Tehran, then stripping away symbols of Iranian state power, including its navy, makes strategic sense. Not because the frigates were threatening anyone, but because they represented something. The Strait of Hormuz is still a powder keg. Here is the bottom line that gets lost in all the victory imagery. The Strait of Hormuz remains a volatile choke point, and it will remain one until Iran's shore-based missiles and IRGC small boat capabilities are neutralized. That is a fundamentally different and far more difficult military problem than sinking surface ships. You can find and sink a frigate. It's large, it has a radar signature, it moves in predictable patterns. Shore-based missile batteries are hardened, dispersed, and hidden. IRGC small boats operate from coastal areas, caves, and inlets along hundreds of miles of Iranian coastline. Mines can be laid at night from civilian vessels. And, critically, the strait doesn't even have to be physically closed to cause economic catastrophe. It just has to be perceived as dangerous. Ship captains and owners make decisions based on risk calculations. The moment the insurance costs of transiting the strait become prohibitive, or the moment a few commercial vessels take damage, traffic stops. The economic impact of a closed strait would ripple through global oil markets within days. Iran knows this. Iran has always known this. The frigates were never the point. What comes next? Iran has limited but real options for rebuilding its naval capacity. If the Islamic Republic survives this conflict in the current form, China is a plausible arms supplier. China has both the shipbuilding capacity and the geopolitical interest to rearm Iran. Other countries with robust defense export industries and limited concerns about Western sanctions could also play a role. Iran also maintains a domestic shipbuilding industry capable of producing medium-sized warships and integrating foreign technology. It's not a world-class capability, but it's not nothing either. If the conflict results in regime change, which remains an uncertain and contested objective, a new Iranian government would have far more acquisition options, potentially including normalized relationships with Western suppliers. But none of that future rebuilding changes the immediate strategic reality. In the short run, small boats, drones, and missiles will continue to give Iran significant leverage over maritime traffic in the Gulf. The conventional navy is gone. The asymmetric threat infrastructure is not. The bigger picture. The destruction of Iran's navy is a real military achievement. Let's not dismiss it entirely. It removes Iran's ability to project conventional naval power beyond its immediate region. It eliminates the symbolic legitimacy that came with blue water deployments. It degrades, at least temporarily, Iran's drone carrier capability. But wars are not won by sinking the ships your opponent wasn't planning to use anyway. The deeper story, the one that will actually determine the outcome of this conflict, is what happens to Iran's missile stockpiles, its IRGC networks, its mine-laying capabilities, and its ability to make the Strait of Hormuz too dangerous for commerce. That is still being written. And the dramatic footage of frigates sinking beneath the waves is not the ending. It might not even be the beginning. The next time you see a headline declaring that Iran's naval threat has been neutralized, remember what's missing from that story. Because in military affairs, what you don't see on camera is almost always more important than what you do.